Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Enjoy this? Let's do it. Ted Bundy says, "We serial killers are your husbands, your sons. We're everywhere." What's one time you questioned if you were actually speaking to a serial killer? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My car broke down on a deserted road. Called our version of AAA. Was told it would be an hour. Okay, no problem. Went to sit in the car with flashers on. Short while later, another car comes up, pulls up alongside and starts talking to me. Tells me he's a mechanic and he can fix it. Just have to go to his house first to get some tools. Really cool guy at the moment, just casual chit chat. What's up, what broke, etc. I tell him AAA is on the way and would help me shortly. Dude gets more pressing. Tells me to get in that car and just come along. It will be quick. Just get into the back seat. I decline. He presses on more, telling me to get in. No thanks. Guy starts tweaking, pulling at his hair, slamming his hands on the steering wheel, swearing profusely. Still wants me to get into his car. Opens his car door and gets out. I lock mine from the inside and roll the window up. He tries to open my door, screaming at me to just let me help him with the car. At that moment, two more headlights pop up in the rearview mirror, and AAA arrives. Guy quickly jumps in his car and speeds off. AAA guy turns his floodlights on to light up the area, gets out of the car and walks towards me. Asks if everything is okay, and if he should start switching the tire. What tire? The engine keeps cutting out. Tire is fine, I replied. Turns out, the guy had cut up both of my passenger side tires. Shudder at the thought of what else could have happened. I met some guy at my favorite bar who was drinking alone. I thought I'd talk to him while I waited for my friends to arrive. He kept moving the conversation to genocide, trying to tell me why it is such a good idea and how the world would be better off if some people died. I tried my best to leave the conversation as soon as possible. No one should be talking about genocide that much while alone at a bar. When I worked retail, I had this guy come in who was a regular. He seemed a little off, but I thought he was just awkward. The last conversation I had with him, he was telling me about the dead prostitutes that they used to find all the time in the river. This was in a city not too far from us. When he was talking about it, he seemed almost gleeful. I have undeniably talked to a serial killer. One time when I was about 15, I was being dragged around on a shopping trip by my parents. I was wandering around waiting for them outside a shop, and a man walked past me with some toilet paper stuck to his shoe. Feeling decent that day, I caught his attention to tell him. When he turned to face me, I was staring at the older version of a mugshot I'd seen countless times before. By pure chance, I was researching this man's case at the time as part of my research on my country's civil war. This man, together with several others, had spent years snatching people off the street and butchering them to death. Some of them had been attacked so viciously that they were almost decapitated. The killers had been released early as part of a government peace deal. The scariest part? I was a member of the religious demographic these people targeted. Thankfully, this man realized I recognized him and made a hasty exit, but man, that was a tense few seconds. Well, I guess it's fortunate for you that you were doing that study and you recognized him, because who knows how that could have ended. Honestly, I've worked with a future serial killer artist. Honest to God, it's a gut feeling, plus this person has all the makings. They had killed so many animals. This person bashed in the head of a possum with other people were feeding and enjoying, then laughed about it. They were really obsessed with wanting to hurt animals. The person could be charming, then bam, out of nowhere, be escalating over nothing. I will see them on the news one day. I know it. This happened a long time ago. I had my dog in the backseat of my car, 6-month-old German Shepherd, and we were driving home from a dog training class. It was dark and in an area with no streetlights. My car starts sputtering, and I knew from experience that the fuel filter was having an issue, and that if I could just pull over for a few minutes, it would get better, and I could make it home. This black car drives by, slows, turns around, drives by again, turns around, and pulls right in front of my car. I lock all the doors. He comes to my car and tries to convince me to get into his car so he could take me to a phone. This was before I had a cell phone. I tell him no, and that my car will be fine in a few minutes. He gets very persistent in trying to get me out of my car. Then he tries to open my door. That's when my dog, who had just recently found her big girl voice, lunged at the window from the back seat and did that German Shepherd, don't F with my human bark. The guy put his hands up and backed away, got into his car and left. From that day on, anytime I went on a long trip or knew I'd be out alone after dark, my dog went with me. I believe she saved my life that night. This guy who used to come into the place I worked, he was an ex-Navy SEAL apparently, and gave off a distinctly creepy, short-tempered vibe. He was friends with my boss, and would tell him stories about clearing oil rigs in the Gulf War. Said he would shoot their kneecaps out with a shotgun, then shoot their heads when they fell. He was happy to tell people about it too, and just general weird shit. Like he would disappear and ghost my boss for months, and then come back and say he'd been away on business. And he would walk around his neighborhood after hurricanes, Florida, with a handgun to stop looters. Creepy dude. Bad vibes. Weird stories. Way back in high school, I met a friend's cousin. He was extremely good looking and charming. He was 15 or 16 at the time. I was 13 or 14. He tried to arm me. He was a wrestler and pinned me down in complete silence, was taking my clothes off while I struggled. Thankfully, I was saved by a friend before it happened. But the whole thing was so cold and calculated. No drugs or drink involved. Apparently, he got in trouble for doing the same thing to someone else on prom night. I never told an adult about it. I assume he was a sociopath and probably grew up to be an artist or serial killer. My mom said she didn't like her husband's friend because his wife was very subdued around him, would look at the ground and barely talk. He would listen to women talk, then argue against their point even if he agreed with them, would roll his eyes or make a scoffing noise. He'd touch their shoulders or arms constantly, and he just gave her the creeps. Then he got arrested for serial R and murders through DNA. Well, the friend's wife was exhibiting actions and behaviors that would seem like they were in an abusive type environment, so good for the wife for figuring it out, and sorry for that person's victims. Terrible. As a high schooler, I met a kid at a summer camp who really enjoyed killing things. It was beyond just hunting, liking to hunt. He'd step on frogs and spiders. He'd kill salamanders. He actually got in trouble for killing a turtle we found. Nobody liked him. He wasn't exactly very nice, but that blatant enjoyment of death really creeped me out. It was kind of a joke around camp that he'd turn out to be a serial killer one day, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. So my wife and I shop at the grocery store together. She's got the list. I'll run off and grab the outside aisle items. She shops the things in clusters. I come back and there's this guy in a trench coat talking to her, and she's very obviously uncomfortable. She's a pretty woman, so this happens sometimes. I walk up and I smile at the guy, ask my wife what else we need to break up the conversation. She mumbles what we need, and then quickly walks away from the guy and me. The guy starts talking to me, and he's way effing off kilter. He starts talking about his mother, then he pulls out a Polaroid of an old woman in a hospital bed. She's very clearly dead as F. He says, "Do you want to see more pictures of my mother?" I said, "You have a lovely family. I must get back to mine." And I went from smiling to stern-faced. I stared him in the eyes, and the crazy that he seemed to exude before changed to a sharp intelligence, mixed with annoyance and smugness. He didn't say a word, just kept staring into my eyes. I didn't look away or walk away until he broke eye contact, so perhaps he thought I was the serial killer, but that's fine with me. F that guy. In college, I had a professor. He had none of the crazy, but he put off the most effed up, dangerous guy vibes. He looked like older Ned Flanders. If he looked at others, it was uncomfortable. If he looked at you, it was worse. Talking to him alone gave the same vibes that the dude in the grocery store gave. I look at people's eyes everywhere I go. My eye contact is comfortable, so I see many others' eyes. There is no better way to describe certain people's eyes other than predatory. Men and women both. Some of them look like predators seeking prey at all times, always waiting. There's an expectation in their eyes that they may see something they want, and they will get it however they need to and by whatever means. That look makes me uncomfortable, and it is a challenge to everything that I am and I feel. A person with that look will never be my friend, and I will never trust a person with that look. We probably won't even make it past acquaintance. We probably won't talk unless forced, and I definitely want nothing to do with that person. I see the look on serial killers, and perhaps I've never spoken to a serial killer, but they both share a predatory gaze, and I'm not interested further. Not around me, not around my chosen people, or family. I live in a small town in Alberta. The friendly lady at the Mac's store disappeared one weekend, and everyone was wondering what happened to her. But nobody really suspected foul play. Me and some friends were partying on a Saturday at a small house, and a guy named Jeff Thurston was with us. We partied all night, and bullshit with him, we knew him from town. He usually didn't party with our crowd. A couple of days later, he assaulted a woman at a hair salon, and it was discovered he had R'd and murdered the nice Mac store lady. So I partied with the murderer while he had his victim held hostage in his basement. Not a serial killer, but pretty scary nonetheless. One family reunion, a distant cousin brought a friend of theirs. The two were heading to a vacation, and the reunion was on the way there, plus bringing an extra unrelated person wasn't totally out of the ordinary. The guy spent the entire time talking and taking a lot of photos of everyone, and kept mumbling about how his friends back home won't believe he met so many beautiful people. Not candidates either. I'm talking like, hey everyone at this table, stand up so I can get a photo. No, just one with you. Now, one with just the men, etc. Tons of these. This was around 2000, so it was with an actual camera, and he wasn't offering to send anyone else the photos later. Just a super unsettling guy, and I still wonder what he did with all those photos. It was 1983 in Fort Myers, Florida, and I was in a strip mall parking lot. A bearded man with cameras asked me if I would model for him. I was instantly creeped out by him and said no. He followed me to my car, telling me what an exquisite beauty I was, and he needed to photograph me. I picked up the pace and ran to my car. He ran after me and grabbed the door handle and shook it, but thankfully I had locked it. I called the police once I got home, as we didn't have cell phones back then. Turns out, this creep was Christopher Wilder, a real serial killer. Glad I got away. Here's a link to his info. My job involves me talking to clients in their own home. One time I went to see a new client. He opened the door and every single nerve in my entire body just silently screamed. I just looked at him and said, "I can't help you," and ran. I've never been so scared in my whole life. Funny thing is, I don't know why I was scared, as he never even got the chance to speak before I ran off. I just know that he was bad. Look, when you know, and you don't have to question it, and you don't have to think twice. It's just what it is, so good for you. I was working out at the gym in college, and it was mostly empty, but this one guy from the machine across from me starts chatting. I'm not a total jerk, so I acknowledged him, but gave very brief responses to kind of give the hint that I didn't want to talk. He was like 30, but had a weird comb-over like a 69-year-old, lanky, oddly fitting clothes, but then he got up and actually stood by my machine and kept talking to me. I studied psychology, and when he found out, that was like his green light to get weird. He started talking about some research he had done in like sociology or something, and started talking about attacks on gay men and how Matthew Shepard may have brought his beating on himself. He was very enthusiastic about the conversation. It was very strange, and he followed me to multiple machines before I basically stopped responding. As an added bonus, I was relaxing in the hot tub after that with my eyes closed, and an elderly man stood over me and poured ice water down my back to make sure you weren't sleeping. It was a weird gym day.